Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to take a look at when and how a player could use the feel of the hands dropping vertically from the top of backswing to create more space and improve their sequencing in the downswing. Thanks once again for tuning in. So we're getting into the off season now, and I first wanted to suggest that if there's any viewers out there that are looking to make some significant movement improvements leading into next year, this is a great time to get your 3D done, get your assessment done with a professional to help you to understand how you're moving and why you move the way you move. And that's something I do on a daily basis with players down here in Florida. So if you're ever interested in getting that mapped out for you, then please do connect with me through ianmellorgolf.com. Okay, so today we're looking at when we could use the feel of the hands falling vertically in the start of the downswing, and how to feel that, or how you could feel that, I should say, because obviously your feels are very much what you own. It's hard for me to tell you how to feel something. So this goes back to a conversation I had with a viewer on Instagram after I posted a video on the sequence of the trail arm in downswing and how the humerus will reach its peak acceleration from an angular velocity. I'm using big words there, I know, but let's just say the humerus will speed up, then the forearm, then the hand in downswing. So that's what we want to try and allow in downswing, but often that gets messed up when we're out of position. Say, for example, if the sequence isn't very good in the start of downswing, maybe the upper body's pulling a little bit too much, or we lose space for whatever reason in the start of the downswing. It doesn't give us the room for the trail arm to have that nice sequence of its own in the downswing, so we can get the speed where we want it at impact. We've got that club face control, we're keeping that pressure with the trail arm into the back of the club for that club control. So we want to be able to give the right arm or the trail arm the opportunity to have the sequence that works best for it in the downswing. So here's how we can use the feel of the hands dropping vertically to help us to achieve that. So often with players, when it comes to sequence in the transition, when the upper body is getting a little bit too dominant, or when we're out of sequence, of course we have to look at physical limitations first, and maybe past training history, and how the player moves through backswing. There's always a number of things to consider, but for today, let's just say in transition we've got a player that's pretty dominant through the upper body, or even the pelvis, the rib cage, the lead arm are moving very much together. That's going to lead to the pattern here where the hands shift out in front and gets us in this steep position in many cases with players, and then they'll compensate with typically right bend or trail side bend to shallow the club in downswing. So let's look at that pattern first. How can we improve that player's sequencing? One way to improve their sequencing in the transition, looking at that area, is to take out the tension. Typically when a player moves very dominant pelvis rib cage arm in transition, they've just stretched so much in the backswing that when they go to transition, there's just no more stretch there between the segments. So the pelvis pulls the rib cage then pushes the lead arm out in front, so they don't have any stretch left. So we can add slack to a player in that scenario if we wanted to go about it that way, by getting to the top and then just very loosely allowing the arms to drop. That will actually create slack across the system, and then they can kind of like fire the bigger muscles into impact. So it helps a player create slack, and in that situation I would encourage the player to get to the top, let the arms drop down to about, let's just say where the elbow is back in front of the trail rib, and then move into impact, something like that. For some players, they actually do very well if they feel like they almost drop it like all the way down here and then turn their body into impact. Often we have to work on that pretty slow pace, obviously very different pattern to what they're used to. Now, the other way that we're suggesting there is that when a player loses a lot of space, now players can lose space for so many different reasons, and again, even the sequencing stuff, I would typically with players look at what I can add in through backswing that gives them a better chance in transition. But for players that want to keep space, often when they get to the top here, they lose space because they're getting very much towards their toes, the pelvis is thrusting towards the ball, and that kind of leaves the trail arm behind the rib cage. So from there, it's really tough to get into that delivery position we want. So in keeping space, all we're doing is we're essentially working on the timing between the pelvis movement and the arm movement. So in letting the arms drop, we're just getting the elbow in front of the hip before the pelvis actually gets time to get in the way. So very, very simply in that situation there, again, just letting it drop quite lightly there. There's not much tension in doing that there, just to build that awareness of what it feels like to have the arms in front of the ball. And a great reference for players when they do that is that when you let the arms drop, just feel where your rib cage is sat in relation to the ball and the ground, because for players that lose space, I think the rib cage can be such a good reference point because it very much moves upward, points out in front, whereas if you let the arms drop, get them more in here, get the hands low, the rib cage, very, very different position in space, and that is something I find players can use to help them when they go out to play. Again, something you're going to have to train at a certain pace and be patient with yourself. It's very, very different position. So that's two ways in which, again, letting it fall lightly from the top can really help. One thing that I like to encourage players to do though is once they get used to letting it drop from the top, say to wherever they want, wherever they find best for them. Some players might actually go all the way down here, especially with driver. You might want to feel it like almost getting to like 2-3 feet before the ball, before turning into it, because it's a little bit of a different release with the driver. So, and that's just what I found with irons. Like players can, they maybe drop it to like here and then move into it because they're getting that little bit more of a downward angle of attack. So what I will then progress to with players is once they are getting the club coming from a better spot, they might even start hitting the ground a little bit early because the body is so quiet. And then that's where you start to add the tension. So it's like initially we're letting the arms drop quite lightly there. We're just kind of letting them almost fall. But then after a while, when you get into a good spot, if you're starting to get some shots a little heavy, start adding in, letting the lead hip open as you're dropping your hands. So the pelvis is learning to move forward, up, open, into its impact position or moving towards its impact position. But now you're also at the same time focusing on the hands in space are still falling where you want them to. Typically, if you did this early on, like the player would let the hands drop, but then it would get pulled out in front. So you're building that awareness then between where the hands need to be and where the lead hip needs to be. And that's a really cool place because those two parts of the body there's two different segments of the body. If you get them in good spots, moving into impact, now you're looking really good. So that's the answer I've got there to the viewer's post on Instagram, but I'm sure there's a couple of things there that you might be able to piece together, especially if you're a player that wants to work on your transition sequence, or you feel like you lose space. Again, from the top, let the arms drop. Iron should be good once the elbow gets in front of the rib cage, then turn into impact. And with driver, maybe even allow it to drop even a bit further, then turn into it. I'll hit one here now. I'll hit it at a fuller pace. I've done enough of the reps here, I feel, with them. I'm going to feel like I get to about here with this, and then I'm going to turn into impact there, feeling as though I'm getting that pull through from the lead hip for me. Let's see how I do here.